She was 17 when she wrote her entire soul onto 4 sheets of cream-colored stationery and sealed it with a kiss she never intended anyone to see. Her name was Sarah, not Luna, and she lived in a crumbling brownstone in Chicago's Wicker Park neighborhood, where the L train rattled her bedroom window every 12 minutes, and she had memorized the exact rhythm of its passing. The letter took her 6 weeks to compose. She drafted it on napkins at the diner where she worked weekends, on the backs of receipts in her backpack, on the Notes app of her cracked iPhone screen, deleting and rewriting until the words felt like they might actually capture the immensity of what she felt. And what she felt was this. She was completely, hopelessly, irrevocably in love with Julian Ashford. Julian was her older brother Theo's best friend. He had been a fixture in their lives since she was 11 years old, the tall, lanky boy who showed up at their apartment with a worn leather soccer ball and a laugh that seemed to fill every corner of their cramped living space. By the time Sarah turned 17, Julian was 22, finishing his degree in finance at Northwestern and already carrying himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going. He still came to their apartment 3 times a week. He still raided their refrigerator like he owned it. He still sprawled across their threadbare couch and argued with Theo about everything from sports to politics to which pizza place had the superior deep dish. And Sarah still watched him from the kitchen doorway, with her sketchbook pressed to her chest, memorizing the way his dark curls fell across his forehead when he laughed and the way his voice softened when he asked her about her art. He called her Serafina. Not Sarah. Serafina. He said it suited her better, something about angels and fire and the way she looked when she was lost in a drawing. She never told him that hearing her full name in his mouth made her feel like she was burning from the inside out. The letter was a confession and a farewell wrapped together. She wrote it on a Sunday night in late August, with the cicadas screaming outside her open window and her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her temples. Julian, I know you see me as Theo's little sister. I know I am probably just a kid to you. But I need you to know that when you're in the room, everything else goes quiet. You make me believe in things I do not have words for yet. I do not expect you to feel the same way. I just needed to be brave enough to say that I see you. And I hope someday you might see me too. She folded the pages carefully, slid them into an envelope, and wrote his name on the front in her best handwriting. The next evening, while Theo was at his night class and her mother was working a double shift at the hospital, Sarah walked the 4 blocks to Julian's apartment, building a converted warehouse near the Chicago River with exposed brick walls and a doorman who nodded at her like she belonged there. She had been there dozens of times with Theo, but never alone. Never like this. She stood outside his door, number 4C, with the envelope trembling in her hands, and listened to the muffled sound of music playing inside something moody and instrumental. She knelt down and slid the envelope under his door. Then she ran. She ran down 4 flights of stairs and out into the humid Chicago night, and she did not stop running until she was back in her own bedroom, with her back pressed against the door and her lungs burning. She waited for the world to end. Or begin. Instead, nothing happened. Julian still came to their apartment. He still ruffled her hair in passing. He still called her Serafina with that same easy affection. But there was no acknowledgement of the letter. No knowing glance. No careful conversation pulled aside to let her down gently. Just silence. A void where an answer should have been. And that silence was the loudest thing Sarah had ever heard. She watched him across the dinner table the following week as he laughed at something Theo said, and she felt something inside her chest calcify into something hard and cold. He had read her letter. He had to have read it. And he was pretending he had not. pretending she had not laid herself bare at his feet, pretending she was still just Theo's kid sister who sketched in the corner and never said much. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot wave that crashed over her every time she remembered the words she had written. She had told him he made the world go quiet. She had told him she saw him. And he could not even be bothered to tell her no. Over the following weeks, Sarah transformed. The soft, quiet girl who pressed flowers between book pages and blushed when Julian complimented her drawings disappeared. In her place was someone with a sharp tongue and a colder gaze. When Julian greeted her, she responded with clipped syllables and averted eyes. When he tried to joke with her, she shot back responses that made Theo glance between them with confusion. When he asked her what she was working on, she said nothing and turned her sketchbook face down on the table. "What is going on with you and Julian?" Theo asked one night, catching her in the kitchen after Julian had left. "Nothing." She scrubbed a plate harder than necessary. "He is just not that interesting. He thinks he did something to upset you." "He is not important enough to upset me." It was a lie. He was the only person who could. 12 years passed. 12 years of holidays and family gatherings and the constant uncomfortable presence of Julian Ashford in the periphery of Sarah's carefully constructed life. She had built walls so high and so thick that even she sometimes forgot what lay behind them. She had graduated from art school and built a career as a creative director at a boutique branding agency in the West Loop. She had dated men who were kind and unremarkable and who never made her feel like the world had gone quiet. She had perfected the art of controlled hostility, the polite but distant smile, the professional tone that carried just enough edge to remind Julian that whatever warmth had once existed between them was long dead. And Julian had become something she never expected. He had taken his finance degree and built an empire. Ashford Hospitality Group owned boutique hotels in 6 cities with 2 more under development. He was featured in Chicago magazines as one of the city's most eligible bachelors, a title that made Sarah roll her eyes so hard she nearly strained something. He still came to family dinners. He still called her Serafina. And every single time she responded with ice. The engagement party was held at the Art Institute of Chicago in a gallery overlooking Michigan Avenue. Theo was marrying a woman named Margot, who Sarah genuinely adored, and the celebration was everything her brother deserved: elegant, understated, and full of people who actually loved him. Sarah wore a forest green dress that made her dark hair look almost black, and she had spent an hour on her makeup achieving the kind of effortless look that actually required tremendous effort. She was standing near the champagne tower trying to decide if one more glass was a good idea or a terrible one when Julian appeared beside her, hiding from the happy couple. She did not look at him, enjoying the view until a moment ago. He laughed softly, and the sound did something irritating to her nervous system. "You know, most people find me pleasant company. Most people have questionable judgment." She took a sip of champagne. "What is it about me, Serafina?" The question was quieter than she expected, stripped of his usual teasing tone. "What makes you look at me like I personally wronged you?" She finally turned to face him. In the amber light of the gallery, his eyes were dark and serious, and something in her chest twisted painfully. "You want a list?" "I could start with your enormous ego." "My ego is perfectly proportionate, thank you." "See? That right there." She gestured vaguely. "That is exactly what I mean." But there was the faintest tremor in her voice, and she knew he heard it. They stood in loaded silence, the party sounds fading into background noise. Julian was looking at her with an expression she could not read, an intensity that made her want to step backward and forward at the same time. "You used to like me," he said quietly. "When you were younger. We were friends. People grow up. They see things more clearly. And what do you see?" His voice was barely above a murmur. "Someone who takes up too much space." She set down her champagne glass with deliberate care. "Someone who never saw what was right in front of him." She walked away before he could respond, and she did not look back. But she could feel his gaze on her for the rest of the night. 3 months later, Sarah's agency landed the biggest account of her career. The Ashford Hotel Group was launching a new property in Nashville, a restored historic building that needed complete branding identity, interior concept, and marketing strategy. And the client liaison would be Julian Ashford himself. Sarah stared at the email for 10 full minutes. Then she called her boss. "Is there anyone else who can lead this?" "You are the best we have, Sarah. And Julian specifically requested you." She considered faking her own death. Instead, she showed up at the Ashford Group headquarters on a Monday morning, wearing a navy blazer that made her feel like armor and carrying a portfolio that represented 2 weeks of sleepless preparation. Julian was already in the conference room, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, with his phone pressed to his ear and his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that Sarah absolutely did not notice. When he saw her, he ended his call and turned with a smile that was entirely too warm. "Miss Valenti." "Punctual as always." "Mr. Ashford." She set her portfolio on the glossy table. "Let me be clear about something. This is a professional engagement. We maintain professional boundaries and professional communication, and we do not discuss anything that is not directly related to this project." He leaned against the table close enough that she caught the scent of his cedar and something clean. "Is that all?" "That is all." "Then, let us get to work." The first week was excruciating. They met daily in the glass-walled conference room that seemed to shrink with each passing hour. Sarah presented concepts with cool precision. Julian challenged her ideas with sharp intelligence that irritated her precisely because it was good. They debated color palettes and typography and the emotional resonance of different design directions. But there were moments. Small, treacherous moments when the professional veneer cracked. Like when Julian leaned over her shoulder to examine a mood board on her laptop, and she felt the warmth of his chest against her back and lost her entire train of thought. Or when their fingers brushed, reaching for the same fabric swatch, and the contact lasted a beat too long and neither of them acknowledged it. Or when she caught him watching her during a video call with the Nashville contractors, his expression soft and unguarded in a way that made her stomach flip. "You are staring," she said after the call ended, not looking up from her notes. "You had something on your cheek." "No, I did not." "You do now." He reached across the table and his thumb brushed the corner of her mouth. "Eyelash." Sarah jerked back like she had been burned. "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Touch me. Watch me. Notice things." His voice was quiet but steady. "Wonder why you flinch every time I get too close." This is exactly what I meant about boundaries. Funny thing about boundaries, Serafina. He gathered his papers and stood. Sometimes they are just walls we build to avoid what we are actually feeling. He left her alone in the conference room, heart hammering and hands trembling with something that was definitely not anger. By week 3, the tension had become a living thing. They were reviewing lighting fixtures for the hotel lobby when Sarah reached for a specification sheet at the same moment Julian did. Their hands collided, and instead of pulling away, his fingers closed around hers. "We need to talk about this," he said. There's nothing to talk about. She did not pull her hand away. You are lying. I am being professional. You are being terrified. His thumb traced a slow circle on the back of her hand, and the touch sent electricity racing up her arm. What are you so afraid of, Serafina? You. She thought the word so loudly she was certain he heard it. Everything I felt at 17 and never stopped feeling. I am not afraid of anything, she said. Yes, you are. He said it with quiet certainty. You are afraid of what happens if you stop hating me. She pulled her hand free and stood abruptly. I am done for today. Running away again. She paused at the door, her back to him. I am not running. I am choosing not to engage with whatever this is. It is not a game, Sarah. His voice was stripped of its usual humor. It stopped being a game the moment I saw you at that engagement party and realized I could not stop thinking about you. She walked out without responding, but his words followed her all the way home. The Nashville site visit was scheduled for a Thursday. Sarah flew down alone and checked into a hotel near the property, a beautiful, crumbling building that had once been a department store in the 1920s and would soon become the flagship Ashford Hotel. She spent the morning photographing architectural details and taking measurements, her professional focus, a welcome distraction from the turmoil in her chest. Julian arrived just after noon. He found her in what would become the lobby bar, her hair pulled back in a messy knot and her sleeves pushed up as she sketched ideas in her notebook. You started without me, he said. You were late. Traffic from the airport. He set down his bag and moved to stand beside her, looking at her sketches. These are beautiful, Sarah. The compliment landed somewhere soft inside her. Thank you. They worked through the afternoon reviewing plans and making decisions. The construction foreman left them alone around 5, and the building settled into a dusty quiet. Sarah was examining a section of original tile work when she heard Julian's footsteps behind her. I need to ask you something, he said. She did not turn around. What? What happened between us? She went very still. Nothing happened. Something happened. He was closer now. She could feel him a few feet away. One day, you looked at me like I was the most important person in the world, and the next you looked at me like I was a stranger. What did I do, Serafina? She turned to face him, and the question that had lived inside her for 12 years finally broke free. You never answered my letter? Julian's brow furrowed. What letter? The letter I wrote you. She heard her voice crack and hated it. The summer before senior year. I poured my heart onto 4 pages and slid it under your apartment door, and you never said a word. You just pretended it never happened. Sarah. I waited for weeks. For months. For any sign that you had seen me, that you had read what I wrote. But you just kept treating me like Theo's little sister, like nothing had changed, like I had not just handed you every vulnerable piece of myself. Julian's face had gone pale. Sarah, I never received any letter. Do not. She held up her hand. Do not lie to me. Not about this. I am not lying. His voice was urgent, desperate. I swear to you, I never saw a letter. I lived in that apartment for 3 years, and no one ever slid anything under my door. Then, where did it go? The question hung between them. Because I put it there, Julian. I knelt on the floor outside your door, and I pushed it through, and I heard it land on the other side. He stared at her, his expression shifting from confusion to something like dawning horror. Theo. What about Theo? He had a key to my place. He used to crash there sometimes when he and your mom were fighting. He was there that week. I remember because he said he needed space, and I let him stay for a few days. Sarah felt the floor tilt beneath her. Theo was at your apartment that night. When I delivered the letter, I do not know, but it is possible. Julian stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face, and she let him. Sarah, if I had read that letter, if I had known. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I would have answered. I would have told you that you were not just Theo's little sister to me. That I noticed you too. That I noticed everything. Tears slipped down her cheeks. 12 years, Julian. I spent 12 years believing you had rejected me in the cruelest possible way. I built my entire personality around hating you. I know. His forehead touched hers. God, I know. And I am so sorry. But I am here now. And I am seeing you. I am finally seeing you. She kissed him. It was not gentle. It was 12 years of longing and rage and heartbreak crashing together in the space between their mouths. His hands slid into her hair, and her fingers fisted in his shirt, and they stumbled backward until her spine met the exposed brick wall. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Julian pressed his forehead to hers. I am going to find out what happened to that letter, he said. But first, I need you to know something. What? I have been falling for you since the moment you walked into that conference room. Maybe since before that. Maybe since you were 17 and looked at me like I was worth seeing. She laughed through her tears. I hated you so much. I know. And I loved you the whole time. I know. He kissed her again, softer this time. I love you too, Serafina. I think I always have. The Sunday dinner at the Valenti household was a sacred tradition. Every week, Sarah's mother, Lucia, filled the dining table with enough food to feed a small army, and the family gathered in the same cramped apartment where Sarah and Theo had grown up. This particular Sunday, the table was fuller than usual. Theo and Margot Sarah, their mother, and because he was practically family Julian, Sarah had barely slept in 3 days. She and Julian had returned from Nashville the previous evening, and they had agreed to keep what had happened between them private until they understood more about the letter. But sitting across from him at her mother's table, watching him laugh at something Margot said was a special kind of torture. You are quiet tonight, Mija, her mother observed. Long week, Sarah replied. The Ashford Project. How is that going? Fine. Julian says you are brilliant. Margot offered with a warm smile. He told Theo you have completely transformed their vision. Sarah's fork paused midair. He said that. Among other complimentary things, Theo added, grinning at his friend. I think this is the most I have heard Julian praise anyone. Julian shrugged, his expression carefully neutral. I call it like I see it. Your sister is exceptional. The compliment should not have affected her. It was professional appropriate. But heat crept up her neck anyway. Remember when Sarah had that huge crush on your roommate Theo? Their mother asked, her eyes twinkling with mischief. What was his name? Daniel. Mom. Sarah groaned. Can we not? What? You were so obvious about it. Following him around with those big eyes. I was 14. Theo laughed, clearly enjoying himself. Sarah has always worn her heart on her sleeve. Remember that phase she went through writing letters to everyone? Sarah's entire body went cold. What letters? Margot asked. Oh, man. Theo leaned back in his chair, wine glass in hand. When she was in high school, she got really into writing these dramatic love letters. Probably read too many romance novels. Julian had gone very still across the table. Theo, Sarah said quietly. But her brother was already rolling oblivious to the tension crackling through the air. She wrote one to some guy she liked, and I found it on the floor of Julian's apartment. I picked it up because I thought it was something important. The room seemed to tilt. What did you do with it? Their mother's voice held a note of warning, finally sensing something was wrong. Theo's smile faded as he looked at his sister's face. I threw it away. She was 17, and the guy was older, and I thought I was protecting her. Who was it for? Margot pressed. The silence stretched impossibly long. Sarah could not breathe. Understanding slowly dawned on Theo's face. No, he whispered. No, it was not. It was for me, was it not? Julian's voice was barely audible, but it cut through the room like a blade. Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Excuse me. Sarah, wait. Theo reached for her guilt, flooding his features. You threw it away. She stared at her brother. 12 years of pain crystallizing into this single moment. You found my letter and you threw it in the trash. I was trying to protect you. He was my best friend and you were just a kid, and I did not want you to get hurt. You did not want me to embarrass myself. You did not want him to actually see me. Her voice cracked. That was not your choice, Theo. I know. God, Sarah, I know that now. But she was already moving toward the door, grabbing her jacket from the hook. Her mother called after her, but she could not stay in that room another second. She made it to the street before the tears came. She stood on the sidewalk under the orange glow of a streetlight, her entire body shaking with the weight of 12 years of misunderstanding. She heard footsteps behind her. Sarah. Julian's voice was rough. Please wait. She did not turn around. He read it. Theo read my letter. I know. He threw it away like it was nothing. I know. Julian's hands settled on her shoulders, and he gently turned her to face him. But I know what it said now. Or I can guess. And I need you to hear this. His hands cupped her face, and his thumbs brushed away her tears. I see you, Serafina Valenti. I have always seen you. Even when you were looking at me with ice in your eyes, I saw the fire underneath. And I do not want to waste another day pretending I do not feel this. Feel what she whispered. This overwhelming, inconvenient, absolutely undeniable pull toward you. This feeling that has been building for weeks and months, and maybe since you were 17, and looking at me like I was worth the risk. His voice dropped lower. I am in love with you, Sarah. I have been falling this whole time, and I finally hit the ground. She kissed him there on the sidewalk under the streetlight with the city humming around them. She kissed him with everything she had buried for 12 years, all the love and the longing and the desperate hope she had tried so hard to kill. When they broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his. I never stopped, she confessed. Even when I hated you, I never stopped loving you. I know. He smiled against her lips. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for that lost letter. Take me home, Julian. She threaded her fingers through his. I do not want to think anymore. I just want to feel. His apartment overlooked the Chicago River, the city lights glittering on the water like scattered diamonds. Sarah barely registered the details, the clean lines, the warm lighting, the art on the walls. All she could see was Julian. He closed the door behind them and turned to face her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I have never been more sure of anything." She crossed to him, and her hands found the buttons of his shirt. "I have waited 12 years for this, Julian. I am done waiting." He kissed her slow and deep, and his hands settled on her waist like they belonged there. They moved through his apartment in a haze of kisses and shed clothing, her jacket abandoned on the couch, his shirt left in the hallway. By the time they reached his bedroom, Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The bedroom was dark lit only by the city filtering through sheer curtains. Julian paused at the threshold, his hands framing her face. "Serafina, I need you to know. This is not just tonight for me." "I know." She rose on her toes and kissed him. "It is not just tonight for me either." He lowered her onto the bed with a tenderness that made her eyes burn. What followed was slow and reverent. He touched her like she was something precious, something he had waited his whole life to hold. His lips traced patterns on her skin, and his hands learned the shape of her, and when he whispered her name against her throat, she felt it in every cell of her body. "Beautiful," he murmured. "God, you are so beautiful." She pulled him up, kneading his mouth on hers, kneading the weight of him, kneading everything. "Julian, I know. I have you." When they finally came together, it was with eyes locked and hands intertwined, a moment of such profound intimacy that Sarah felt tears slip down her temples. "I see you," Julian breathed. "I see you too," she managed. And it was the truest thing she had ever said. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like both of them. Sarah's head rested on Julian's chest, and his fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. The city hummed beyond the windows, and the world outside seemed very far away. "What happens now?" Sarah asked into the quiet. "Now," Julian tilted her chin up, "we stop wasting time. Now we choose each other every day. Even when I am difficult. Especially then." He kissed her forehead. "I love you. You know, I think I have loved you since I was 17 and too young to understand what that meant." His arms tightened around her. "I love you too, Serafina. And I promise I am going to spend every day showing you." She smiled against his skin. The letter found its way eventually. It just took the long way around. As dawn began to paint the sky in shades of rose and gold, Sarah drifted to sleep, wrapped in Julian's arms, feeling safer and more whole than she had in 12 years. The girl who wrote a letter and never got an answer had finally found her way home. The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and the unfamiliar but welcome sensation of Julian's arm draped across her waist. "Morning," he murmured against her shoulder. "Morning," she replied, turning in his arms. His hair was a disaster, and his jaw was shadowed with stubble, and he had never looked better. "I need to talk to Theo," she said quietly. "I know." He kissed her forehead. "I will come with you." "No." She traced his jaw with her fingertips. "I need to do this alone. And then we tell him together." 3 hours later, Sarah stood on Theo's doorstep. Margot answered her expression gentle and knowing. "He is in the living room." She squeezed Sarah's hand. "Go easy on him." Theo was sitting on the couch, looking like he had not slept. When he saw her, his face crumpled. "Sarah, sit down." She sat across from him. "We need to talk. I do not know how to fix this." His voice cracked. I do not know how to apologize for stealing 12 years from you. You cannot fix it. She said it not unkindly. Those years are gone. We cannot get them back. But she took a breath. I understand why you did it. You were 23 and he was your best friend and I was your 17-year-old sister. You thought you were protecting me. I was protecting myself too. Theo admitted. I did not want things to get complicated. I did not want to lose Julian if things went badly. So I made a choice, and it was the worst one I have ever made. When did you realize? About 6 months later. I found the rough draft of the letter in your room. I read it, and I understood what I had done. But by then, you had changed. You were so cold toward Julian, and I convinced myself that maybe you had moved on. That maybe I had done you a favor. I had not moved on, Sarah said quietly. I just buried everything under anger. I know that now. Theo looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. I am so sorry, Sarah. For the letter. For the lost time. For every wall you built because of what I did. She let the apology settle between them. She had imagined this moment for years, had rehearsed all the angry speeches she wanted to deliver. But sitting here, seeing her brother's genuine anguish, she found that anger had softened into something else. I forgive you, she said, and watched relief flood his features. But you need to call Julian. He is your best friend, Theo. He has been your brother in everything but blood for 2 decades. Do not lose that because of guilt. How can I face him? The same way I'm facing you. With honesty. She took her brother's hand. He loves you. And he needs his best friend. Because... She paused, a smile tugging at her lips. He is kind of in love with your sister. And that is going to be weird for all of us. Theo let out a surprised laugh that turned into a sob. He pulled her into a fierce hug. I love you, Sarah. I am so sorry. I love you too. She hugged him back, feeling years of tension finally release. Now, pull yourself together and call your best friend. Julian was at the Nashville property when Theo showed up unannounced. He looked up from his laptop to find his oldest friend standing in the doorway of the construction trailer, looking uncertain in a way Julian had never seen. Can we talk? They walked through the gutted lobby of the old department store, their footsteps echoing off exposed brick and scaffolding. Finally, Theo stopped near a dust-covered window. I messed up, he said. 12 years ago, I found a letter Sarah wrote to you, and instead of giving it to you, I threw it away. I let my own fear destroy something before it even had a chance. Julian had known this conversation was coming, but hearing it still landed hard. Why? Because I was scared. Theo's voice broke. Scared of losing you if things went wrong. Scared of my little sister getting hurt. Scared of anything that might change what we had. I was selfish and stupid, and I stole time from both of you. You cannot get those years back, Julian said honestly. I know. Theo looked devastated. I understand if you cannot forgive me. Stop. Julian gripped his friend's shoulder. You made a terrible choice. Yes. But you were trying to protect Sarah in your own misguided way. And I get that. I am not going to throw away 20 years of friendship over a mistake you made when you were barely an adult. But Sarah and I found our way to each other anyway. Julian could not suppress his smile. Maybe we needed those 12 years to become the people who could actually make this work. Theo studied his face. You really love my sister. Completely. Irrevocably. Embarrassingly so. And she feels the same. You would have to ask her. But Julian grinned. Yeah, I think she does. Theo pulled him into a rough hug. Then I am happy for you. Both of you. And I am sorry it took so long. We have time now, Julian said. That is what matters. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the completed lobby of the Ashford Nashville, the space she and Julian had built together. The grand opening celebration swirled around them, investors and journalists, and local dignitaries, all marveling at the restored architecture and the warm, modern design. She wore a deep burgundy dress that made her feel powerful and beautiful, and Julian had not been able to stop looking at her all evening. You did this, he said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. We did this. She accepted the glass. This was a partnership, remember? Best partnership I have ever had. He kissed her softly. I have a speech to give. Nervous, terrified. He admitted, but I will survive. You will be perfect. The room quieted as Julian stepped onto the small platform near the grand staircase. Sarah positioned herself near the front, her heart full to bursting. Good evening, everyone, Julian began. Thank you for being here to celebrate the opening of a place that represents so much more than just another hotel. He spoke about vision and craftsmanship and the importance of preserving history while embracing the future. His words were genuine and moving, and the room was captivated. Then his tone shifted. This project almost did not happen, he said, his eyes finding Sarah. We had the resources and the vision, but we needed someone who could see what this place could become. Someone brilliant enough to challenge every one of my assumptions. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. 6 months ago, Sarah Valenti walked into my conference room and proceeded to dismantle everything I thought I knew about this project. More laughter. She was ruthless and brilliant and absolutely right about everything. Working with her was... He paused, his expression softening. It changed my life. Sarah's heart began to race. Sarah, could you come up here? This was not in the program. But Julian was looking at her with an expression that made her knees weak, and everyone was turning to watch. She walked to the platform on trembling legs. Julian took her hand. I need to tell you all something, he said, addressing the crowd, but never looking away from Sarah. This woman standing beside me is not just the brilliant creative director who transformed this space. She is the person who makes me want to be better, who challenges me and frustrates me and inspires me, who saw me when I did not think anyone was looking. 12 years ago, she wrote me a letter. A letter I never received. A letter that said I made her world go quiet. That she saw me and hoped I might see her too. His voice roughened with emotion. I never got that letter. But somehow, against all odds, we found our way to each other anyway. He reached into his jacket pocket. Sarah Valenti, he said, dropping to one knee. I see you. I have always seen you. And I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how completely and devastatingly seen you are. He opened a small velvet box, revealing a vintage ring that sparkled in the warm light. This was my grandmother's. She told me to give it to someone worth the wait. You are worth every moment of waiting. Every year of not knowing. Every wall we had to break down. Will you marry me? The room was silent. Sarah looked at the man kneeling before her. The boy she had loved at 17. The man she had thought she hated. the partner who had seen past every defense to the truth underneath. She thought about the letter that got lost and somehow still found its way home. About timing that had seemed all wrong but was actually perfect. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. Of course, yes." The room erupted as Julian slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her like they were the only two people in the world. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too," she said through tears and laughter. "Even when I thought I hated you, I loved you." Theo was suddenly there, pulling them both into a fierce hug. "Welcome to the family officially, brother." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and champagne. Sarah's mother cried happy tears. Margot squeezed her hand and whispered about wedding planning. And through it all, Sarah kept finding Julian's eyes across the room, kept touching the ring on her finger to make sure it was real. 1 year later, Sarah walked through the vineyard at a small winery outside Chicago, where they had decided to host an intimate harvest dinner. Her hand rested on her rounded belly. The baby, a girl they had learned last month, kicked gently. Julian appeared at the end of the row, his sleeves rolled up, his hands dusted with soil from helping pick grapes. When he saw her, his entire face transformed. "There are my girls," he said, reaching her and placing both hands on her belly. The baby kicked again, and he laughed. "She knows her daddy." "She knows she is loved," Sarah corrected, covering his hands with hers. They stood together among the vines, the afternoon sun painting everything in gold. In her pocket, carefully preserved in a frame at home, was a letter. The one she had rewritten and finally given him on their wedding night. Some stories took the long way around. Some letters got lost and found and lost again before finally reaching their destination. But standing here with Julian's arms around her and their daughter growing inside her and a future stretching out before them like the vineyard rose, Sarah knew one thing with absolute certainty. The wait had been worth it. Every moment, every heartbreak, every wall built and broken down, all of it had led them here. To this perfect, imperfect, absolutely right moment. The letter had found its way home. And so had they. Sometimes the greatest love stories are written in silence. In letters that never arrive. In glances that go unnoticed. In hearts that wait years to be understood. Sarah and Julian's journey proves that timing is not everything. Sometimes the detours, the misunderstandings, and even the pain shape us into the people capable of holding the love we have always deserved. Their 12-year wait was not wasted time. It was preparation. A reminder that some connections are so profound, they will find their way back to you. Even through the longest silence. Even when hope seems lost. What if the love you are meant for is already closer than you think? Just waiting for the walls to come down. If this story moved, you subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Comment below and tell us where in the world you are listening from. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that touch hearts.